The Arizona Cardinals bolstered their defensive coaches group, much needed, in fact, last week. I'm bringing on a guy who knows about him more than most. Let's discuss.
You are Locked On Cardinals, your daily Arizona Cardinals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Cardinals, Alex Clancy here. Thanks for making Locked On Cardinals your first listen, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm just going to do it. Chris Carter, Locked On Steelers, joining me. Teryl Austin, a new senior assistant for the Arizona Cardinals. This is more important than just an older dude coming in to help a younger coaching staff. And I think Chris is going to shed some light in that. First of all, Chris, what's up, man?
What's up, Alex? Good to be on the show with you, man.
We don't really do this a lot.
We don't. You know? Crossover Thursdays are few and far between Arizona and Pittsburgh.
Yeah. So for those that don't know, Teryl Austin was the defensive coordinator for the Pittsburgh Steelers since 2022. Those 4 years, they averaged under 23 points per game given up. The Cardinals have averaged 26 points per game given up on the defensive side over the same time. So from numbers, seems like an immediate impact. I have a couple rules on this show. Anybody on the defensive side of the ball for Pittsburgh, get them over here. I don't care. Tell me what Teryl Austin brings to a defense that some may not know.
Teryl Austin's going to bring a lot of knowledge of the secondary. That's what got him hired in Pittsburgh. And he had his run of being defensive coordinator. He was a DC for Florida. He's a secondary coach for the Ravens. He was a DC for the Lions. Darius Slay, and when he was in his prime, gave a lot of credit to Teryl Austin, helping him come along as a player. He had a rough year with the Bengals in 2018, but then he came to the Steelers in 2019. And for 3 years, he was the secondary coach and a senior defensive assistant. And during that time, the Steelers were under defensive coordinator Keith Butler. And Keith Butler's defense was very specialized in blitzes and being aggressive up front and sending heat from everywhere. But it didn't have a secondary coach who could put things together on the back end. Coverage was often lacking. And sometimes also personnel-wise, it just wasn't that great. But when Teryl Austin arrived in 2019, shortly after, the Steelers trade for Minkah Fitzpatrick. And then all of a sudden, the Steelers go from one of the worst secondaries in the NFL for years into one of the best. And granted, the injection of Minkah Fitzpatrick, Joe Hayden certainly helped. But Teryl Austin was very much a big part of putting that together, disguising a lot of the coverages. And oftentimes during those years, you'd see the connection between him and Minkah Fitzpatrick when they would, whenever Minkah Fitzpatrick would be in practice, when he was done at practice, he'd be talking at Teryl Austin, like in between, the first team reps and the second team reps. And then when Teryl Austin was promoted defensive coordinator, a lot of that went through Minkah Fitzpatrick. And so there was a lot of respect between those two specifically, and then also between the rest of the defense. And in 3 of the 4 years that Teryl Austin was a defensive coordinator, the Steelers gave up, they ranked 10th or they've been ranked in the top 10 in points allowed. So they were top 10 scoring defense in 3 out of the 4 years he was a coordinator. This was the year that was going to be seen like, oh, maybe they can take a rise up and get into the top 5. They fell back down to 17. Mike Tomlin stepped down after the season, and then the Steelers basically just said, we're going to remake this entire staff because we're going to go get Mike McCarthy. So that's why Teryl Austin was out of a job. But my opinion, I thought he did a good job for what he was given in Pittsburgh. I think that he, as an expert, as a sort of a defensive specialist, a guy who's going to be coming to kind of assist, I think he's going to bring a lot of wisdom to the Cardinals, help shore up any problems, and he'll be able to see things and help you fix them, throughout the week-to-week basis.
Yeah, that's all really fun information for me to hear. I mean, that's ear candy for me for a couple of different reasons. For those that don't know, Teryl was the DB coach for the Arizona Cardinals when they went to the Super Bowl, and they played the Pittsburgh Steelers. I guess the grass was greener for him, which makes sense to go over there to an organization that's been a staple for quite some time in winning. So one thing for me is I've given Nick Rallis a pass for the offense being anemic and then the defense kind of giving up points after. Teryl Austin was offensive anemia proof for 3 years. Usually if you have a not so great offense, your quarterback play isn't the best, the defense suffers. That wasn't the case for him. So that's got to show, the grit and the ability to run a defense when your offense isn't helping you out. Now, I want to ask you this. Will Johnson was looked to go top 10, then he was looked to go in the 20s last year, and then he dropped to the Cardinals in the late 40s. This is great news for him. This is great news for Denzel Burke, who was a rookie from Ohio State last year, who actually made all rookie out of nowhere. This is good news for Garrett Williams when he comes back, for Budda Baker if they retain him. This is seriously ear candy for me when the secondary last year was supposed to be their calling card, and they fell short of that.
I think it should be. I think that Teryl Austin, he's a smart guy. Whenever I talked to him, I got a really good sense of what he was trying to put together. I think the biggest thing that sometimes got in Teryl's way was play calling per se. I think that sometimes he'd be caught in a package that wasn't ideal for a situation. But overall, as far as understanding the game and applying it and teaching it, he was very good at that part. And I also thought it was interesting. He's very willing to listen to his players and to be on an even ground with them and have a give and take. A time that I reference a lot to Steelers fans. One of the funniest Teryl Austin moments is the Steelers Packers in 2023. At the end of the game, the Steelers are up by 4 points or so, and the Packers are in Hail Mary range. And so in this game, it's Jordan Love. The secondary is missing Minkah Fitzpatrick. He's been hurt all game. And so at the end of the game, the Steelers line up for their final defense. Well, Minkah Fitzpatrick just comes yelling, and you just see him on the I think it's the Fox broadcast. He's just you see him yelling and pointing, and he's yelling, and so then the Steelers call a timeout, and Minkah Fitzpatrick was basically telling him, "We're in the wrong defense. We're in the wrong defense." And Terrell's going I know, I'm fixing it. And so that was just a really funny moment that I thought of. And so they got it right. They called it up. I think they talked to Grady Brown, who was the DB's coach at the time. He's now a DB's coach with the Saints. But that's the thing about Teryl. He wants to listen. He wants to hear what his players are saying. He trusts his players on the ground, especially when he has leaders. I think Budda Baker is one of those guys that's going to really benefit from that. Is hey, this is a long-time coach. He'll hear out what I'm saying, and Teryl Austin will try to take what Budda Baker gives him and give that to the head coach and be hey, this is what our leaders say, and this is what we need to do, because that's what Minkah sort of had. So Teryl Austin bringing that to the Cardinals, that can sort of help organizationally with trying to hear out leadership in the secondary.
Chris Carter, Locked On Steelers. I have two more questions for you. I'm going to ask them after the break. Boop. I'm not sure why I booped there. I think it's because it's the extra show, and I'm still getting used to it. Today's episode of Locked On Cardinals is brought to you by Indeed. Workplace chaos, deadline stacking up, inbox overflowing, and the one position you have to fill still sitting open. When the pressure's on and you need the right hire, this is a job for sponsored jobs. Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for, skills, experience, location, etc. So you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. And here's a stat for that. In the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours have made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all the boxes with Indeed Sponsored Jobs. And Indeed and listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about us on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Today's episode of Locked On Cardinals is also brought to you by the Game Time app. So I talked about this before. I went with my pops to the Suns and the upstart Hornets game on this past Sunday. He's like, hey, how are we going to get tickets? I'm like, hey, I'm using the Game Time app. That's actually how the conversation went. He goes, what the hell are you talking about? I said, don't worry about it. I got it. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets, okay? You have to stand in line for everything, food, everything. And it's like, well, at least getting in the building should be easy. And that's why Game Time makes it so simple. So say you haven't sat in a section or row of your favorite arena. You can go to the Game Time app, click on the tickets that are available for that section and row, and it'll give you a panoramic view of the seat before you buy them, so you know what your vantage point will be. It's badass. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets. Download the Game Time app, create an account. Use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. All right, Chris Carter. So 2 final questions here. One, Nick Rallis doesn't really run a base defense. There were times on the field last year, there were 5 safeties on the field. It's like the only thing that Nick Rallis does is puts 11 guys out there. He's not going to tell you what they are. It's like, NHL when you used to pick the skinny, medium, or fat guys. It's like, doesn't matter who they are. They're just going to be out there. Is that something – he's going to be a senior assistant. He's not going to be calling plays. Is that something that he still has the ability to wrap his head around, being kind of more the old head in the space? Or is he going to be more of that mentor guy? Obviously, you don't know. We don't really know exactly what his role is. But is he just going to come and be a mentor and just kind of figure it out? Like, would you imagine that?
I can see the mentor role being in there. I just think that one thing that he also does a good job with, I think, is the overall schematics of trying to draw out certain things and trying to make certain things work. I think sometimes the Steelers would try to go a certain way about things. They would try to to follow a certain script or a certain philosophy, and sometimes that wouldn't jibe with what their personnel was, and I think that sometimes caught them in some rough situations. But oftentimes they'd work around and be like, "All right, we see that where that's a problem now. Let's fix it." And Teryl Austin was very good at that. I think that Teryl Austin can adapt to the new adjustments in the game. I mean, there's a lot of positionless football going out there right now. Like, something that I actually asked Caleb Downs about at the podium at the combine. Was about how safeties are just so fluid now. And he's like, yep. And that's something I trained for when I started my time at Alabama. I wanted to be a guy who could play every role that was asked of me. And so I think that that's something that Teryl Austin is going to try to help with is getting guys used to that kind of a role. And so that's, I don't think that'll be a problem. And I think that, mentoring, kind of being, again, in this sort of senior defensive assistant type of role, I think that's exactly where he would be very helpful to a team and help them figure out some problems week to week.
Yeah, and he compliments Nathaniel Hackett, who's going to be the OC, but more of the same role that the Teryl Austin's going to be. One last thing, it's the Jack Del Rio effect. It's what Jack used to do. He goes to be a DC with a job, knowing that the head coach is on the hot seat. He takes over as head coach, consistent as gravity. Is this a world where Teryl doesn't want to be DC anymore? You alluded to it a little bit earlier, where it may have been his last year anyways. Like, do you see a world where if Nick Rallis doesn't live up to expectation this year, that Teryl Austin could supplant him in 2027?
I mean, maybe. I mean, he's been he started his coaching as a GA in college in 91. So he's been doing this for almost 40 years, 35 years or so. So I don't know if that's going to be enough to push him out and to make him think that he's not, he's 61 years old. So that's not end of coaching age. This might just be a stop before he goes somewhere else and tries another stint as a DB's coach or as a defensive coordinator. But I think, when you're part of a staff that gets kind of dismantled, sometimes you get moved around. If you're not seen as one of the biggest gets of that staff, you need to kind of rebuild yourself a little bit. And 61, that's not old in coaching years. So I think that this is more of a thing where if it's an emergency, sure, the Cardinals could look and be like, hey, you've called a defense before, you've run a defense before. We'd like you to step in and do this job, and he could do it. But I think this is more so just he's going somewhere he can hey, let me show I still got this. Let me establish a connection with some more people, and then let me see what jobs I can create after this. It's the coaching carousel, guys. Establish connections everywhere. I think that that's what he's done really well throughout his career, is that he's coached with a lot of really good coaches. He's coached under Harbaugh, he's coached under Tomlin. So I wouldn't be shocked if this wasn't I would be shocked if this was the last place that he coached. I'm pretty sure Terrell's got a few things lined that he's going to try to line up, especially if he can get things to improve in Arizona.
Yeah, well, the Cardinals, I wish I could say they haven't been used for leverage before, but it's kind of what their job is in the NFL. Chris, tell people where they can find you.
As always, thanks, Alex, for having me. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, wherever you get social media. My handle is always at Carter Critiques. You can read my work in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette by going to post-gazette.com. I have a lot of drafts preview stuff there. Also, with the draft being in Pittsburgh, you want to learn about what's going on there, head up to the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette at post-gazette.com. And as always, just like you find Alex, you can find the Locked On Steelers on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube like this video if you enjoy Alex's work. Check out our channel, too, if you want to get more information about what's going on with the Steelers.
That's a damn tagline. Alex Clancy, Locked On Cardinals. Remember, without you, there is no me. I'll talk to you tomorrow.